Bookcase and Coffee presents Buzzing About Romance, a quick shot of romance.
Hey everyone, welcome to a quick shot of romance. It is me, Becky, and joining me this time is Carolina from Curl Up with Books. Welcome back, Carolina.
Thanks, Becky. It's good to be back.
So on this episode of A Quick Shot of Romance, we are reviewing One Moment Please by Amy Daws. This is book 3 in the Wait With Me series. So real quick before we get into the synopsis, something that Lee and I have talked about with the podcast and the quick shots is we're going to start trying to make sure we're encompassing books that have been released for a while. So I know it can be harder to find indie authors in your library, but there is things like Kindle Unlimited and stuff. So that's something that we're working on a little bit, just because one of the things that comes up often is how can you afford to read all of these new releases? And we're lucky because of the book blog and stuff, we get advanced copies and stuff. But we understand that a lot of our listeners are not book bloggers and ARC readers. So we want to make sure that we're well-rounding our picks.
Kindle Unlimited is your friend.
It is such your friend. I love it. I think it's so great because you can try out different books and stuff like that. And there will be a link in the show notes. If you have not signed up for Kindle Unlimited yet and you want to try a free trial and stuff, you can sign up through the book blog. And if you go with it, we get a kickback. So you can help support the podcast by having Kindle Unlimited. So who knew, right?
Who knew?
So Carolina, will you read us the synopsis from Goodreads?
Absolutely. That awkward moment when an ER doctor has to inform you that you're pregnant with his baby. 3 things Lynsey Jones knows about the hot doctor. He's grouchy, an arrogant jerk, and strangely obsessed with pie. 3 things Dr. Dick knows. He doesn't talk about his past. He doesn't do relationships. And the crazy girl in the hospital cafeteria who ate a fistful of French silk pie is annoyingly irresistible. After a chance meetup at a bar and a heated cab ride together, things come to a head, and now instead of hating each other, they're horizontal in a bed. 3 months later, the weird cafeteria stalker who crept out of Dr. Dick's house like a thief in the night winds up as his patient in the ER after her Tinder date from hell. Dr. Dick is prepared to keep it cool and professional. That is until her bloodwork reveals that she's pregnant. What really throws him for a loop is that the surprise baby is his.
So the release date on this is April 9th of 2020. It is part of Kindle Unlimited, but you can also purchase the ebook. The trope is surprise pregnancy, one night stand, meet cute, insta-lust, age gap. It's a steam level of about a 3. And the angst is a 2, mostly Dr. Dick's fault. All angst is his fault in this book.
Absolutely. And there is a hint of enemies to lovers kind of vibe going on as well.
Yeah, because he's super resistant to all of this. He's fairly guarded. We'll get into that. This is book 3 in the Wait With Me series. And I believe this was a reread for both of us.
It was. I actually did the audiobook of this one. I read the book the first time, and then I did the audiobook this time.
Awesome. Okay, so let's break down these characters. First up, Miss Lynsey Jones. So when we meet her, she is working on her master's degree in social work. She has found writing inspiration in a hotel.
In a hospital.
Oh my God, a hospital cafeteria.
Take three.
Words are hard. In the hotel.
In the hospital cafeteria.
Right, hospital. Cheese and rice.
It's kind of inspired by her friend, Kate Smith, who from book 1, who wrote her novels, her romance novels in the tire store.
Right, in the waiting area of the tire store.
The tire store. Hence, Wait With Me. There's kind of a waiting room element to it. So she found her vibe in the hospital cafeteria.
Yeah, she was at the hospital, like hanging out and waiting while her mom had had some minor same day procedure. And so there's no trigger warning needed as far as the main characters go. There's no like, neither one of them are suffering medical issues or anything like that. Lindsey is just inspired. And one of the good things that's part of the hospital cafeteria is the pie.
Well, yeah, there's a buffet of food, and she's fallen in love with some French silk pie,
Yeah. I mean,
which I I would fall in love with French silk pie too.
same, same. I'm like not adverse to French silk pie either. Like, I love it.
Well, she also has a theme that she's a bit of a foodie, so
Yes.
French silk pie is not her only vice, which I loved about her.
She is a bit of a foodie, and I think that that's something that I find like really relatable to her also as a character.
Mhm.
That you know, her, I don't want to say her obsession with food, but her food experience is very relatable to
Exactly.
somebody that also likes
And
food.
she likes a good cocktail. She has a
She
tiki
does,
bar in her backyard
in her
that
backyard, in the
yeah.
townhouse that she can't really afford to live in anymore. I felt so bad for her. So let's talk a little bit before we get into things, how things kind of break down for them. Let's talk about Dr. Josh Richardson, otherwise known as Dr. Dick.
Which Lindsay calls Dr. Dick. She gives him that nickname, pet name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of Richardson, but also he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, that kind of bugged me a little bit about him. He does like a pity party. He is super moody, which was a
Mhm.
little annoying. Um, and he definitely, so this is where you get the enemies to lovers vibe. Like, he comes at her when she is in the hospital cafeteria. He's like, "Why are you here? What are you doing? Why do you keep coming in here? Nobody knows who you are."
And why do you keep eating pie?
Right. And then there's this very funny dramatic scene with the pie that they mentioned in the blurb. It's so funny. Um, but he also is a bit selfish, I think, and a little bit his emotional responses were a little immature. I thought so too, also.
Yes, I would agree with that. There's situations that throughout the book are revealed on why he is the way that he is. Um, but I think it's taken to the extreme a little bit for a little bit of for some comedy in the story throughout.
Yeah.
So they're very much opposites, where she's sunshine, happy, positive, trying to make the best of things, making her way in life, and he's been through an experience that has put up walls, definitely. So he's on the other end.
Yeah, he guards his heart, and he's very right to guard his heart. I mean, he experienced something in his life, and I don't want to give it away or anything like that, but he
Mhm.
experienced something in his life that his responses, once you know that about him, his responses make a lot more sense. So if you
Yeah,
start reading this and you think, "Oh God, this guy's a bit of a jackass," stay with it. In the end, it comes around. You
it
start
does.
to understand and experience why he is the way he is. I did think it was funny. Lindsey was clueless about being pregnant at first. Just because, so I have two children, and I was clueless both times when I was expecting my children. One was a sinus infection, and the other was the stomach flu that lasted like months. So completely relatable. But I mean, leading up to the date and going to the emergency room, so funny.
She brings she brings a little bit of like comedic drama with her, and there's a lot of kind of internal monologue with it where she's just kind of falling apart in her head, which I thought it made me laugh again. Rereading it, just those are the parts about like, oh, this is why I love this book so much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she is an optimist, but then she like builds herself up And then she like talks herself out of things. Next thing you know, she's talking herself into those things. And it's like, okay.
And she also has a little bit of confidence issues as well.
She does.
There is a bit even within her career, like she's trying to do the right things and take the right steps, and she knows what she wants to do. And in her personal life, where she sees herself with amongst dating and men, and how she sees herself and her availability, or who would be a good match for her. So I think that's relatable as well. And some of those internal dialogues that she has um, are extremely relatable, because you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I totally get that.
Yeah. Um, I do. So as they come together, and now, she's gone after this very terrible Tinder date. She has gone to the hospital. She finds out she's pregnant. Sometimes when we have surprise pregnancy in a book, automatically the couple is together. Like, we're going to make this work. This is going to be great. But because of Josh's past experiences, it isn't automatic for them. I loved that about this story, that there was work they both had to do. Now, them moving in together, and that was part of it because of her own situation where she wasn't going to be able to afford her rent anymore, and the lease was coming up, and they decided to move in together to kind of figure things out with the pregnancy and kind of date while living together, which created some very funny moments. My favorite moment in all of that is when she gets her neighbor. Is it Dean? Is that the neighbor?
Yeah.
She gets Dean to mount the television set on the stone fireplace.
Well, it's Dean and Miles, and actually I think it's Miles and Sam who mount it.
Oh, is it? Okay, I thought it was
Because
Dean. Yes.
Well, it's all three of them who help her move into Dr. Dick's house. And there's two of them who are mounting it on the stone fireplace.
Yeah, and then his dad comes in and is like, what idiot mounted the TV to the stone fireplace? And she's just like, I don't know who that was.
This historic stone fireplace.
Right? That was so funny. That was like such a funny, and that's something this book definitely has, is this witty banter and back and forth dialogue. So if you like a book that's heavy in dialogue and heavy in verbal exchanges, Amy Daws writes very well with dialogue and verbal exchanges. And that's totally a plus in this story.
Absolutely. And you find that not only with the scene with the parents, but with Lindsey and Kate, Lindsey and Dean, and on occasions when Lindsey and Dr. Dick get into those sparring matches, they're even going at it sometimes.
Right. So Dr. Dick has a hard time letting anybody in. He has really big walls. He even keeps his own family at arm's length.
He does. And I think that goes back to the past experience, which, as you're reading through it, you're like, okay, what is really going on? There's a point in the book, you're like, okay, come on, tell me, what is it? Like, let's break down part of the wall. Let's break down some bricks. And, Lindsey's optimism throughout really tries to say, hey, let's get there. What's going on? Help me understand, be part of this experience with me. There was a point where he kept calling it in doctor terms, the fetus. She's like, no, it's the baby. It's Peanut. She nicknames the baby Peanut. Like, do you want to touch my belly? Like, come on, like, make this connection. Help me out here.
Well, he really tried to limit how much he cared, is like what I think it comes down to. He just, and again, that goes back to his past trauma. And I don't want to give anything away.
Well, and then on the flip side, you could see that he also cared. So I don't want to make him sound like a complete jerk, because he wasn't. He really did care. He was more about protecting his heart And he showed his care, like his love language, if you will, was keeping them safe and keeping them protected. And he felt the best way to do that was for them to be under his roof so he can monitor her and the baby. And even the scenes with when they're in with the doctor, her obstetrician, and they're getting the scans and getting updates, and his questions to the doctor, his concerns, should she be on bed rest? Is this too much? What about this? And so he goes at that from one angle and Lindsey goes at that from another angle. So they're each kind of like embarrassing each other. But ultimately he does care extremely. He's just showing it within his current capacity.
Yeah. And it does take a moment to get past some of his tortured hero pieces and stuff like that. This, like I said, this was a reread for me. First time I read this, I liked it. It was delightful. Little things bugged me, but none of it that wouldn't have me saying, this is a good surprise pregnancy. It plays out like surprise pregnancy. It had plenty of laugh out loud moments. Amy Daws knows how to write a rom-com. 100% she knows how to write a rom-com. So let's talk real quick before we get to our final questions. Supporting cast of characters.
I love the supporting cast too.
So we have Kate, and then her guy is
Miles.
And Kate's the romance novelist and best friend. And Miles is the guy that owns the tire shop.
He doesn't own the tire shop.
He doesn't. Just runs it.
Sam owns the tire shop, and
okay.
he's Sam's number 2.
Okay. So I honestly read these books. I read this as a standalone, and I read these out of order. So I read Dr. Dick first. I read One Moment Please first, and then I read. Then I went back and read Kate and Miles. I've not read Sam's book, and I did read Dean's book, which is book 4.
So you have Kate and Miles, who are book 1, and he is Sam's number 2. Sam is from book number 2, and I forget his.
Well, there's a bachelorette party scene in this book that is so funny on the party bus.
And I think that's where Lindsey embraces, her. She kind of plays it funny. She embraces her pregnancy. She's full. I think she's like 6 or 7 months by that point.
Yeah.
The party bus has a stripper pole, and she's dancing around and joking and around. But actually, I think my favorite scene with the secondary cast is when they have Kate's party to celebrate her finishing writing a book. And it's also, I think they also kind of tie in Lindsey's completing her.
They do. Her master's degree in social work. And
her
stuff.
Master's. And Lindsey hasn't told Kate that she's pregnant. And so they have to reveal it at that party.
Yes.
And let's just say hilarity ensues.
Oh, yeah. And it was super awkward. It was definitely one of those moments where you're like, how's this going to play out?
Because Kate can be a little melodramatic.
Kate can be very melodramatic. Okay, so let's get down to the final buzz. Did you like this book?
Yes, I enjoyed this book thoroughly. I enjoyed it because you have Amy Daws does a really good job, as we talked about, with the dialogue. There's fun banter. It had its more serious moments in this book, which are a little different from the other ones, but at the same time, I was laughing and giggling throughout it.
Yeah, I do. I like this book. It's funny and quirky. It's a well done rom-com with a surprise pregnancy in it. If you are not sure if you like surprise pregnancy, then I think that this is a great example to kind of showcase that. So who would typically like this book?
I would say very much rom-com, very much rom-com niche. It's not as like kind of wild and crazy as Max Monroe, but if you like kind of that bantery comedy, you would enjoy this.
Yeah, I said lovers of rom-com, it very much is an Avery Flynn vibe to it. If you like Avery Flynn's books, the only thing I will say is Amy Daws is a little bit spicier than Avery Flynn. Avery Flynn tends to be a little more mellow in the spice, so I think that this is like about a 3 in the spice. I always typically put Avery at about a 2.
I would say this, there was parts of this that were a little bit more, so I'd push this to like 3.5.
Okay,
spice.
That's fair. That's fair.
You know, their first encounter was a little spicy.
That's
with
true.
Some of her requests.
That is true. That's true. Okay, I'll give it. It could
She
almost be a 4.
She had her own little kink.
She had some kinks
requests.
for sure. Yeah. Would you recommend this book?
Absolutely.
I would too, especially if someone's looking for an easy, low angst. And I said mid-steam read, but she is right. The first sexual encounter is a little spicy, so it might be a little more than mid-range steam. But overall, it's a great read, and I really definitely think it's worth checking out.
And you can definitely read it as a standalone. It is part of a collection, but this is one of those series that can be read independently.
100%, yeah.
And it's one of those that you then become curious about the secondary characters, and you're like, okay, now I want to read their stories.
Yeah.
And having read the 4th one, knowing what Dean's story is, the teasers you get in this one, I'm like, oh, I didn't catch them as much the first read because I obviously hadn't read the book, but I'm like, wow, she teased the 4th book more than I remembered.
I did feel that
great.
too. I did feel that too, because I had read book 4 and I was like, oh. So definitely worth the read and definitely worth checking out the other books in the series. So Carolina, thank you so much for joining me for this quick shot of romance.
As always.
We'll actually be back in a couple of episodes. You and I are doing another surprise pregnancy, so maybe we're theming it a little bit. Anyway,
I think somebody likes that trope.
I heard someone has a thing for that. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. Happy reading.
Find us on Instagram at buzzingaboutromance or on Twitter at buzzingromance. If you like the podcast, please leave a review. If you'd like to support us directly, join the Bookcase and Coffee Patreon and receive exclusive content only available to Patreon members. Check out bookcaseandcoffee.com for our on-the-shelf show notes.